Hi, welcome to the Art Journaling Basics webinar. We are live and we're going to be looking at a number of different really great art journaling techniques tonight. So I just want to welcome you. I'm Amy Miracle and I'm from Mindful Art Studio at mindfulartstudio.com. If you are just joining us, I'm just going to turn on this Q&A app so that you all can submit your questions. There's a box that you should see, I think, in the top right corner that pretty much looks like the Google Apps squares or maybe a Rubik's Cube it might look like to you. So you can hit that and that will allow you to submit questions. I'll try to keep an eye on that as I'm working. And anything we don't get to, we'll try and get to at the end. And if you're joining us on YouTube, you might see a little thing across your screen that says join the conversation live. You've got to be over here on Google Plus in order to ask questions. So, so great. And we're also broadcasting from my home studio, so welcome. And also just so you know, you may hear life happening, dogs, kids, what have you. So great. So we are going to go over a bunch of different things. I'd like to leave you with a number of different tools for you to play with. The first is kind of creating a foundation or a basis by developing backgrounds. We'll go over a basic watercolor technique, which then we can build on in a number of different ways. Then we'll go into developing images. And one of the things that I think makes my art journaling technique a little bit different from some of the other folks, the great folks that are out there, is the way that I do it is a little bit more organic and less kind of formulaic. So the way that I'll explain that to you is by showing you a bunch of different examples from my own journals and then showing you kind of how I approach allowing what kind of naturally shows up on a page, whether it's from the watercolor, different shapes, how I let that guide me in my process as I come up with images and kind of how I develop things. So we'll look at some samples and then I'll show you some examples of how I let it inspire me and kind of move forward from there. So that'll be interesting because I've never done that sort of live in front of other people. And then, you know, that'll include us looking at collage with a mix of magazine cutouts or your own pictures, or also I use a lot of really great fun papers, whether it's tissue paper that I save from gifts that I get, or if I get the bleeding tissue paper, or lots of times I'll buy really fun patterned papers that I get at places like Paper Source. So those are really fun too. And then lastly, we'll look at incorporating text and writing into your journal, which is a really fun thing to do. And I've got at least one trick for making your lettering look really interesting, even if it's kind of not. It's kind of a good little trick. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions and answers. And so we'll kind of take it from there. So I'm really excited to get started and hopefully show you guys a few things that maybe you haven't tried exactly like this before. So I am just going to start with a basic watercolor wash, like I said. And again, this is a little different for me because I'm not sort of used to working kind of sideways and up and down like this. I've just grabbed my bamboo brush. And I like these. This is, you do not have to use a bamboo brush. This just happens to be what I like. You can find it in any art or craft store. And it's just bamboo with the bristles out of it. I just like it because it gives I'll show you in a little bit, it gives some very interesting line quality, both fat and really thin and delicate. And I find it just kind of allows me to get some effects that I don't get otherwise. With all these techniques with the watercolor, you're going to start out by wetting the page. Now, I'm just going to do a bunch of different samples in different sections of the page. So we'll start up here, and this is going to be the basic watercolor wash. So if you're following along at home, you're just going to wet your brush with just plain old water and get the page wet. Obviously, also, I'm not working in my journal. I'm working in just a piece of mixed media paper so that you guys can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take a nice blue shade so that hopefully it's easy for y'all to see. And I'm just going to go, the way that I'm doing is I'm just going back and forth across the page. You can totally play with different ways of doing this. And again, because I'm working more up and down instead of flat on the table like I normally would, we're really getting the benefits of gravity. Now this one's not actually pulling as much as I would expect it to, but one of the great things about watercolor is that it drags and pulls. I'm going to see if I can very carefully bring this over so that you can see. If you're not familiar with watercolor, there's just some really interesting things that it does when it kind of runs and drips. So you can also actually lift up your page at home or your journal and move it around and get the paint to do different things and play with that. And again, that's kind of part of the way that I work. I love to see just naturally what the paint is going to do or what the materials are going to do, and I try and then follow that instead of sometimes trying to force it. And I guess that's where kind of the mindful part comes in. Okay, so that's just your basic watercolor wash. You can also do that with more than one color. If you were doing it flat on your art journal, you would do the same thing, except you would start at the top and then you do a different color starting down here and work your way up, and then just kind of go back and forth so that you blend them in the middle a little bit. Okay. You can also work with layering watercolors. I saw a really amazing tutorial from a watercolorist about a month ago, who I don't remember her name, but she really showed me there's a lot to know about watercolor, and I was really humbled and really inspired by what she had to do. But basically, she did a lot with layering, so she would do basically put either red, blue, or like a gold kind of color or yellow under a lot of what she did with the watercolor, and that would kind of then enhance or influence the colors that she put on top of it. So that can be another really fun thing to play with. It's called what she calls underpainting, and I think that's probably the real artist term. Anyway, hopefully you'll pick up some artist terms while we're working too, which will be fun. All right, so now you go back to, this one's gonna be, we're gonna set up for doing a wash, and we're gonna put in some texture by using saran wrap. So I'm going to set this one down, hopefully not forget about it while I'm working on the next one, and we'll come back to it in a minute because we want to let it set up a little bit before we come in. Let's see. And in terms of the watercolors I'm using, you know, especially when you're just starting, don't get too caught up in which kind you're using. You can see the drip is happening much more in this one. I think that's probably because it's just much more wet. So again, you can play with the amount of water you put when you wet the page and also in the paint itself. So like when you hit your palette with the water, how much paint is actually on your brush when you get into it. That'll affect how much it moves around on the page also. Speaking of moving, I'm moving my easel on you, sorry. So yeah, so, and actually, I think I've probably blabbed enough. I can probably do the saran wrap. So it's, again, just a regular old piece of saran wrap. Probably not great if it has lasagna on it. I want to just have it clean. And then you just dab. And it does this really cool thing where you get all this texture. And I'm afraid I've gotten a little bit of this glare in here for you there. That's probably a little better. Okay, so you get this really great texture happening. I'm going to see if I can manage to show you this. Isn't that fun? And that can be a great, see, these are all great things to play with for backgrounds, right? Because it's much more interesting to start with a page with some color and texture on it than just a white page. It's also much less scary to start with a page like that. So that's another reason. Okay, so now the next one that we're going to do using the watercolor wash is called wax resist. Now, one of the things I like to do is teach people that a lot of these art terms are not nearly as scary and complicated as they seem. So this is just a oil pastel. It's basically like an adult crayon. This one's Craypaw from Expressionist, but again, you can use whatever. I often use things from, you know, Michael's that are more kind of discount level. I think they have a brand that's called like Artist something, and it's, you know, it's a couple of bucks per pack. That's a great, great, great thing to start with, because it'll get you started with the oil pastels or the chalk pastels or watercolors, whatever it is you're looking to try. And honestly, these are from Michael's, and I've never used them before because I sort of assumed that something in this price range wouldn't be great. And no, it's not something that's like a high quality watercolor, and if you were doing a serious painting, you probably wouldn't want to use it. But honestly, it's got some really great colors, and for my purposes, using it for art journaling, it's been a lot of fun. You know, so you can play with this. I also have other watercolor sets and watercolors that come in tubes. You know, there's a lot of different things that we can experiment with using. So the idea is really just to play around. So so now this is the wax resist. So I'm just going to literally kind of put some scribbles on here. You could write, you could draw something figurative. It doesn't matter, it's totally up to you. So I'll do that before I wet the page, obviously. And actually, I'm gonna go ahead and, I'm not gonna wet it first, I'm just gonna go at it with the color directly. You could wet it first and then play with that and see how fun that is. It's like doing art when you're a kid and the pictures magically show up as you put the water on it. Isn't that fun? I love that. So you can imagine where on a journal page, this could be really, really fun and a really great base for doing other things on an art journal page. Okay, so the next one I'm gonna do is another wash. So I'm gonna go into my plain water and make a little block over here. I unfortunately forgot to keep one of my waters totally kind of clean and clear, but since I'm using all blue, it doesn't really matter. If you're gonna use more than one color and you wanna be able to wet the page, you wanna keep one water kind of pure so that it doesn't tint other colors that you're trying to use. So I'm coming again with my blue. I'm just coming right across the page, nothing complicated. You can see it dripping again because I've got it more wet. It's really fun. For someone like me who uses a lot of nature imagery, I love this kind of stuff because it immediately looks like either mountains or water. So that's really fun to play with. So now, one of the kind of splurge items I had on your supply list was gesso. So again, this is one of those things that I think can feel a little intimidating. I feel like I'm doing all these advertisements for Liquitex and all Michaels and sorry. Anyway, any gesso is fine. And all gesso is, you know, when you see a canvas hanging on the wall, it's just the white material that gets painted over the canvas. So that the colors sit on top and don't sink down into the material. So that's all it is. There's nothing complicated about it. Just know that it will stain your clothes because it's meant to. So I'm just gonna pour a little out onto, I have like a little disposable palette here. And you could just as easily have just a little piece of wax paper or parchment paper. And I have a toothbrush from the dentist, unused, except for art. And I'm just gonna get some gesso onto my toothbrush. So it's just kind of wet with gesso. And I'm sure I'm gonna splatter this in places I don't mean to, but you're just gonna rake your finger down the toothbrush, and that's gonna create some splatter that hopefully is gonna look kind of like a starry night. Oh, good. We had good luck. Now I'm gonna hold that closer so you all can see it because it's more subtle. It's not something you're gonna see from distance, like super strong. And that's pretty cool. And I'm not gonna demo it right now because it would be harder to do up and down. But the other thing that you can do while the watercolor paint is still wet is to get kosher salt or the larger kind of coarser salt. And when you have your art journal laying flat on the table, your paint is still slightly wet, but maybe not soaking wet, but kind of wet. You just take salt and just sprinkle it over the top and let it sit. And it'll give a similar but different effect where the salt will kind of pull the paint away from it. And so it leaves like these little starbursts that are really, really fun. And you can use that in a lot of different ways. So for instance, I made a little sample for you with using this gesso technique. You can also use white paint I meant to clarify that. You can use white paint, no problem. But here's a page that I did in black with the exact same technique as what we did here with the watercolor wash. And then I included a really great Rumi quote. So I'll read it to you first. It says, "Your task is not to seek love, but to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." And there you have. And for this one, I found that the gesso splatters were not quite as strong as what I was hoping for. So I actually went in with the white gel pen that I mentioned, and just like kind of filled it in, made some of them a little stronger so that I had a variety of some a little lighter, some a little darker. That's another element that'll help your art to be more interesting. So that's a nice kind of tip as well. Okay, so now we're gonna do a little bit of stamping. And let me see, it looks like this one's dry enough. So I didn't put, I'm gonna not use white. I know I put white on your list for white paint, but I'm gonna use this blue because it's gonna show up better and be easier for you to see here on the computer. So I'm just putting a little bit of paint on my palette. Grab, not the watercolor brush this time, but I have, this is a short, flat brush. There's nothing complicated for this. It really doesn't matter. You could use a child's watercolor brush if you wish. It doesn't matter at all. So, and I have a stamp here. And actually, before I start, I guess I want to talk to you a little bit about stamps. So stamps are something that I kind of have a real love for. They are incredibly expensive when you buy them in the store, and often rightfully so, because especially when if you get something off Etsy, for instance, that's been hand designed. I mean, there's some really, really seriously talented people who are doing some incredible stamps. And if folks are interested, I can put up some links on the Mindful Art Studio Facebook page, or maybe I'm probably going to do a post on this so I can include them in a future post too. But in any case, there are some really wonderful people, but it is really easy to make your own stamps and make them really original, really interesting, without having, pretty much any special art talent. This is one of my absolute favorite stamps right now, and I made it in like 2 seconds. I just cut out of craft foam, which you just get in these little sheets at Michael's or wherever. And I just cut little shapes that looked roughly like elongated leaf shapes, and just kind of pasted them onto this wood block. I also do a lot using like soda cap bottles, or if you get the milk that comes with a little screw top, like those tops are really great too. Like anything, or for a larger stamp, you could use like the top of a peanut butter jar or a mayonnaise jar. Anything with a nice flat surface like that is really great. So let's see. So anyway, so this is a really great way to do it and make your own stamps. And I'm just going to pause for a minute and say, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat box. If you hit that little icon with, like, I think it's like 9 squares or something, that's Google's app picture, that'll pull up the chat function, and you should be able to submit a question there. Great. So we're just going to put some paint actually on here. So that's the other thing that I do with stamps is I do love inks and ink pads, but frequently instead of using ink, I'll use paint because it's just much kind of cheaper in the end. That stamp pads tend to wear out, and I'm not into like printer's inks at the moment. So paint is a really great option. So I'm just going to take my paintbrush and just kind of dab it in the water a tiny bit, put a little bit of acrylic paint, and just paint it right onto the top of the stamp. Again, I'm not doing anything complicated. I'm just getting the top basically covered and wet with paint. You can play with how thick or thin a coating you would like to have. Okay. And then I'm just going to press it flat and firm onto the surface. And it makes a nice little pattern. And it's fun to vary the direction of your stamp and create sort of a pattern out of it. You can practice sort of reloading it with paint before you go back and not, so that you get variety in the saturation of the paint. It's also fun to run it off the page so it looks more random. And I do that a lot in my journal pages. I do lots in my journal pages with stamps, and you guys will see that. So let's see. So go right here and right here. If you're trying this at home, that's really fun. And I sort of wish I could see you, because that would be really fun if we could be seeing each other. But unfortunately, that's not one of the options yet on here. But hopefully you're having fun with it. Okay, so I think we'll leave it about like that. Now, if you've got your stamp at home, remember to just wet it and get the paint off the top of the printing surface, because otherwise when it dries, you'll be printing the dried paint instead of the stamp that you're trying to print. Okay, so that's stamping. And then I wanted to show you also kind of how loose you can be with this and how fun it can be. So again, I'm just going to wet the page. Okay, and then I'm going to do 2 colors this time. And I'm just going to kind of very loosely draw. And this is why I love this brush, because you get such a variety in the types of marks you can get. And I'm going to take a purple also. And if you pull back, you can kind of get these super delicate lines. And then if you go more, you'll get a big, big swath of color. Okay, and that can be really, really interesting. You know, if you do your whole background, just kind of playing with the color this way, that makes a very interesting, varied background, as you can see. All right, so, and then I wanted to also show you about fixing something if you're not pleased with the way that it comes out. So let me see. So I've got over here, let me very carefully try to take this. Wait, I think we'll come back to that in a minute. So here's another sample. I was, kind of deciding what I wanted to do. And if you're not happy with something that happens in your journal with the watercolors, you might try, get a new brush here. I'm just gonna grab another flat brush just because that seems like fun. You might try grabbing the gesso, right? I've definitely had pages that I look at it and I say like, oh my God, this is horrible. Definitely don't like this. So you can do that and then say, okay, I wanna cover it over. And actually I'm gonna do this one simply because I've got chalk pastel in this one and I'm actually not sure what the gesso is gonna do with the chalk pastel. I feel a little bit more confident about what it'll probably do here with the watercolor. Okay, so you can basically just cover back over your page and change it. And what you'll start to notice is there's definitely still transparency to the gesso, and you don't need to be so careful. You can kind of be a little bit messy and random with it so that it looks a little more natural, or you can certainly be very methodical with it and do several coats until it, but so you can see how it is actually starting to pull some of the watercolor color, which in my opinion is really good because then you can start to have a much more interesting, varied background if you didn't care for it in the first place. And I'll show you in a minute what you can do with this. But you can take a really not great painting and turn it into sort of an interesting muted background. All right, so there you can see how that got covered over. And I'll show you one of those backgrounds in action. It's gonna take me a minute to identify where it is because I have lots of things I wanna show you here. So, here we go. Okay, so now I haven't written on this yet, but this was a watercolor painting that just had a lot of swirls and it just basically wasn't working for me. it was interesting, but I wasn't loving it and wasn't into it. So, and I had seen a really amazing two-page spread like this where someone had done concentric circles and then written within it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. I really want to do my own version of that. So I'll just show you. So I've drawn in the circles. I don't think you can see it that great. Oh, I guess you can see it a little bit now. And so at some point when the right mood strikes me, I'll know what words belong in there and I will write it in and use that. I could also choose to work with cutting the page. This is really fun. So I could take this half circle on both sides and just cut out all of this excess here so that the page before it would be showing through, right? And that could be another really fun technique. So you can do a lot with the gesso, and that's one of the reasons that I put it on your supply list, because I think that it's a really fun way to work. And it's also great the way that it interacts with the watercolor and can help sort of smudge it. I've also had, yeah, okay. So I've also had pages where, for instance, I'll do a lot where I stamp and I check something out and then, you know, then the page just looks like not much of anything. And so then I'll go back over it with gesso, and now it's, you know, it's got sort of a varied background that then I'm going to put more color or collage over, do something with. Okay, so that's another interesting way to work with the gesso. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to show you with the gesso. So that's that one. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, again, like I was telling you before, about using your backgrounds as inspiration for the images. So let me identify a couple here that I can start to show you as examples, and we'll see where we go. Okay. So, oh wait, you know what? Let's keep talking about the stamps for a minute. So, because here's one with the stamps. Okay, this is a stamp. That's unfortunate. I'll get that in a minute. And stuff falling out. So this is a stamp that when I first stamped it on the page, it's, I don't know if you can really tell, but it's just this discrete circle that kind of looks like pebbles or something. That was what I was going for. But when I stamped it just once on the page, I thought, that doesn't look so great. Really doesn't satisfy me. I don't get it. But what I'll frequently do when I do a stamp is just to keep stamping it over and over again, either in a like kind of a clear, discrete pattern, or overlapping it like this, where it starts to just become texture. And you can let it peek out in some places like this to add interest, but you know, like over here, it almost just reads like a bunch of little cobblestones. So, and if you look closely, you can see that what I've done is to start to allow this stamp to start to inform what the image or the background is. So I just started going in with some colored pencils and chalk pastels and Sharpies and just kind of outlining these shapes and going in between these shapes. And you can see that there's a bunch of text written underneath as well. And that's something else that I use in my art journaling a lot. When I write something that I find very personal and I'd feel uncomfortable if someone else found it, then I, you know, I often do that. Let's see. Oh yeah, so we have a question here from, sorry, I'm just getting used to this, from Liz. And Liz wants to know a question regarding making your stamps. How do you attach the foam to the plastic top? Do you use a glue gun or super glue? Awesome question. I don't like glue guns for that purpose because I find that it just comes off. I have thought about using super glue, and that's probably a really great way to attach them. And the material that I generally use lately is Yes paste. I will say that I have thought about using the super glue because there are times that I find a Yes paste is fantastic and I can wash the stamp a million times and it never comes off. But there have been a couple of times where I've found the stamp detaching. So that's a great question. Thank you so much for that one. That was great that you got us to answer that. Great. So that's one example of the stamp as the background. Let me see. And then I wanted to also show you, oh wow, I just put this in a bunch of paint. That's exciting. While I get cleaned up, you guys can take a peek. So I don't know if you can see, but actually on the left side page, it would be better if this will read for me. Okay. I don't know if you can see, but actually on the left side page, there's also writing underneath that one. So this one, I had writing, and then I went over it with a Sharpie, and again, just kind of like I did before with the wax crayon, I just kind of scribbled. And I really, really, really want to encourage you. That is a great technique. Everybody can do it. And if you can be loose with it, you will look like an artist who really knows what they're doing and is really comfortable using the materials. So then I just use those shapes as inspiration, right? So I took a lovely little gold marker and I filled in some of these gold shapes, and then red and orange and yellow, and I leave some white. And so you can see some writing peeking through, and I'll show you. So again, it becomes very, very interesting and very fun. So let me just see if there was another stamp that I wanted to show you. Oh yeah, here's the same thing, different stamp, more stuff falling out of my journal. And here I have outlined the stamp, and then I've taken the gold marker and put in some words on top. And so you can see how I start to play with layering here, because there's an initial layer of stamps and watercolor. I wasn't liking the way the page was working, so I started outlining these shapes and then went back over it with a darker color of watercolor, went in with some of the gold marker, did another layer of, like, I think the first time I did hot pink, then I did a layer of purple. It's not my 100% favorite page, but it's a page that I had a good experience doing. I learned a lot, and it was relaxing. And lots of times, honestly, that's the whole purpose, is getting some stuff off your chest by working through the art. All right, so I think that's what I wanted to show you in that book. Let me show you, so since we've talked about that one a bunch, let's work with that a little bit. So I did a sample here ahead of time. So you can see, again, with this stamp here, and I have a very similar colored marker. And again, I'm working totally off the cuff here, so this is not something that I have planned or really know what I want to do. But, you know, this is something that, looking at it right away, I'm thinking, you know, there's some interesting spaces in here. I might want to do some text in here. So I know I said we would talk about this at the end, but let's talk about it now because it's coming up naturally. And again, that's kind of part of the whole method, is that you really allow your instincts to kind of guide you. And the more you do it, the more instincts you'll have about it. I know that in the beginning, it can feel a little bit tough. And now this one, you won't be able to see while I write it, but we'll see if I can chat a little bit. Another interesting thing that I do with this is I really often will just allow whatever words naturally emerge for me to just come out. I don't plan it. I don't know what it means. But I just kind of write whatever comes out. And sometimes it doesn't make sense and it's not interesting, but lots of times it's very interesting. So let me see. And I'll show you when I do this also the technique for making your text look more interesting. So I am just writing, I am doing a demo. There we go. Usually it's a little more inspiring than that, but since I'm going off the cuff, I am doing a demo. But see how just by varying the height on the lettering, it makes it a little bit more interesting, and that's just caps. Another thing that you can do is vary it in between caps and lowercase. That can make it sort of interesting as well. But now I might take that same piece and, let's say, use some chalk pastels. And again, I think that there's tons of different brands out there. There's ones that are softer and more crumbly. There's ones that are harder. It's really about what's in your budget and experimenting with things. There are things that I like the harder Conte crayon chalk for. Conte is C-O-N-T-E if you're interested. And that's a harder chalk. It's not nearly as dusty. Some people don't like how the chalk comes off in their fingers. But I like the really, I like the harder ones for one purpose and the kind of softer ones for a different one. So I'm just going to choose a color that's kind of in the same family, but a little different, and see what happens. And I often will just look at my colors and allow color to just choose me instead of me trying to choose it. I find that that often makes things a lot more interesting than me trying to overthink it. And so let me put this back up for you. Let's see if I can do this up here. All right, so I've just laid in, I've just traced this line of this part of the stamp right here. And then you can take your finger and just kind of smudge it. And like I was saying before, really use the edges of the stamp kind of as a guide. So now I just made like a thin line next to the other two stamps so that there's a sense of depth, because I've got a dark line here and a dark line here and a dark line here, and then there's color in the middle, but it's not so dark. See if you can see that, right? And right now it doesn't look like much, but if I continued to do that same method over here, and then around each and every little leaf, it would start to create this, like I said, this sense of depth and variation in the color that's really interesting. And then you could also play with layering in other colors, either similar colors or sort of contrasting colors. But you can also see how this doesn't require a ton of thought. It's very, very relaxing, very fun to do, and it's a much more, I want to say natural, but that's not really what I mean. Like, I think a lot of the art journaling techniques are great and are fun, but I think that if you're looking to really develop your own style, your own images, and be able to really relax into and tune into the art, I think that things like this, and there's other people doing other great techniques too, but a technique like this really allows you to kind of just zone down into the art and really enjoy it and explore it and discover it. And for me, that's my experience, is that that's the really fun part. That's when art is moving and meaningful. So that is something to try. Let me just throw in a little kind of highlight here just for kicks and see how we go. So I'll take a different finger because this one's got all the blue, dark blue on it. When you're done, you'll have lots of different colors on your fingers. It'll be fun. So kind of throw that in there. And this color, as I'm looking at it, really kind of matches. And you can also play with going over the stamp and sort of muting out parts. That is fun too. Again, you'll notice I just keep saying play with it, play with it, play with it, because that's half of the purpose, is the playing. Okay, so that's one way to kind of let the image guide you. Now, when you do more kind of loose flowing things where you're kind of scribbling, you may start to actually see kind of actual images. Now, I'm on the spot, so I'm a little bit forcing this. But let's just pretend, for kicks, that this looked to you like an elephant trunk, because that's the one thing that kind of came to mind, right? So you might outline that. And then again, smudge to kind of create more of a solid thing. And then you might see like, well, you know, I think basically this kind of looks like part of the head, this line here. And I'm not going to get too worried about it being perfect. I'm going to enjoy the fact that there are some distortions, because that's part of what it's going to make it kind of artsy. I'll take a little license if I want to get a little kind of point on the ear there for some reason. Nobody has to see this, Allow yourself some opportunity to just see what might happen if you toy around with it. Now, you know, it would take me some time. Right now, it doesn't look super elephant-like. But if I kept playing with it, I could get it there, you know, like, so maybe I'm deciding that this line roughly is the back, and then maybe this is the tail, and for some reason it's swishing up. And so I kind of outlined that. I like the way that right now the body is becoming sort of, it's a little weird. It's kind of interesting. And there are these other lines going on up here that kind of make it look sort of interesting and artsy. You know, I would have decisions to make about whether I was going to put in actual legs or let it be a little bit more floaty. You know, as I say that, I get this sudden impulse to kind of like put it as though it's floating or swimming. So I might play with that a little bit. You know, and imagine that this is your, God, I'm going to have blue all over me for this webinar. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, I probably do. You guys can tell me in the chat box. But yeah, you can imagine like what a cool journaling page this would be, instead of just having like some stamp that you bought at the store and whatever. Like suddenly you're on this path of discovery. Like there's this elephant appearing here, and what is this, and what's this about, and can I develop it, and wow, look what I did. You know, if I hadn't kind of followed those lines, I never, you know, I wouldn't have attempted an elephant here just kind of by myself freehand, especially not in front of, you know, however many people are watching. So it's really fun. I think I've kind of made my point on that one. So let's see. So that's kind of using the background. Let's see if oh, right. So with the wax, when you use the wax resist, right, up in this one, that's another great place to either use it as inspiration for color, which actually I'm just kind of seeing something. So I'm going to go with it. Like I had an impulse to, I don't know, purple. Or, oh, there we go. Yeah, I wanted this color. Just this like lovely contrast in the color between the pink, kind of fuchsia, hot pink color, and this light blue and the white. And here's where you really may start to see things. Oh, and it's very interesting when you use the chalk pastel. You may start to notice that the wax or the crepe pastel, or if you're using a wax crayon, I think this will work. The chalk kind of sticks to it in a really cool way. See how it kind of sticks and it doesn't go as smoothly? And so that's an interesting effect that you can play with. All right, so, you know, I would probably continue to kind of smudge and pull this color around a little bit. You know, like it's not up in this area yet, but watch. See how I can, I don't know if you can see that up there. It's faint. But you can actually, in a more subtle way, pull the color, come down here, get some more on your finger, and pull it up here, and I'll show that to you so you get a sense. See how it's more subtle up here, but that's really nice. And again, it's about varying that tone so that it's more complex, just like in real life. So again, it's not about making it lifelike, but just kind of pulling in some of the elements that make things feel more real, while they're more kind of fantastic because it's art and it's not going to be, you know, kind of necessarily something that's super representational. Okay, so now I want to show you some collage. Collage is super, super fun. This is one of my all-time favorite art journals that I've made. You can see this sweet little eye, and it says waiting. It's actually a really kind of sad, bittersweet book that I made from a time that I was really sad about something, but that's kind of the beauty of it because it's so precious to me. It's so satisfying, and it said it so well. And I don't think I did any drawing in here whatsoever. So you can see the cover. And I don't know what every single element means. Like I've got, oh, let's see, I've got one of my photographs that I had printed out that's on top. I've got some tissue paper. I've got, I think, a picture of a flower under here. And then this is a really lovely high quality handmade paper that I bought either at the art store or at Paper Source or something like that. And so you can use kind of those different textures. I like photography a lot, so like this is a photograph of my own hand and kind of the idea of reaching. And then I've got this, I think it's a photograph from a card. And then this paper is the bomb. I wish you could feel it. It basically feels like bark. I'm not even really sure. I think it's an actual fiber of some sort, like from trees at some point, I guess. But anyway, it's fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. It made a great background because it looks like wood. So having that as kind of the pages was great. You know, and you can see how, again, I've incorporated a self-portrait together with cutouts of a piece of, from a flower. And then, you know, incorporating just a little bit of text in there to tell the story. So you kind of get the idea there. You know, and it can also be really simple, right? Just a torn out image that's very, very expressive. And then it says, where are you? And again, you can see that I haven't done anything super special with my writing here, but just the fact that I used the special scissors just gave it a little bit more interest. And I leave some things much more natural, leaving kind of the torn edge. Not everything is kind of cut out perfectly and all that. So that's that one. You can also use magazine photo collage almost completely with just the pictures, and that is another really fun way to do it. So this is a page that I really, really like. It's not the most kind of artistically challenging page I've ever done, but I really enjoy it. I got the picture, this main photo in National Geographic. I often enjoy using things that just have a lot of kind of background color that's really interesting. And then I glued on this is fabric that I glued on, okay? And then glued another picture, and then I've got a string, and I made like a little fish that I colored in with marker. So you can see how you can kind of layer things and make them interesting. And this is another page. This is an altered book, by the way. I altered Khalil Gibran's The Prophet's Not Done. Here's the cover that I've been scratching up to make it, when the covers are waxy like this, it's very hard to get anything to stick to it, so you kind of have to rough up the surface to get stuff to stick. But in any case, this is just a little art piece that I did with tissue paper and oil pastels. And the piece itself, I didn't know where it belonged, and I just hung on to it, and that's what I encourage you to do. Hang on to every little piece that you do, even if you think it's terrible. Okay, well, if you think it's really terrible, get rid of it. But like most of the time, there's stuff that you have where you could look at it and be like, okay, this little piece right here is interesting. This little piece, I like the colors. You'll be able to tear out, cut out those little pieces and put them into your journal, and they will become amazing, I promise. So here's a question from Liz. Do you seal your collages with Mod Podge? I do not. Mod Podge has a really bad reputation for yellowing. And I think maybe even cracking. I think I don't seal my pages, but I was listening to a video from another art journaler the other day who I think uses like gel medium, if I'm not mistaken. But you would probably want to look that up because I don't do it myself. So thank you for that question, Liz. And then let's see. And don't be afraid to ask questions, guys. That's part of what makes it so interesting. All right, hang on. Okay. I wanted to show you kind of an in-action page. Sorry for all the leaning over. When I put this up earlier, I dropped a bunch of the elements that I needed. So we'll get this out of here. All right, so now here is a background that I made several months ago. So if you haven't caught on already, I love making backgrounds. I find it really fun and very relaxing. This one, I think I used either watercolors or water-soluble crayons and just kind of did the same sort of thing where I just kind of went across the page. But then I went through and I wanted a lot more kind of texture and interest to it. So I went ahead and went in with I think, colored pencil and some chalk pastel. I don't think there's any marker on here. No, but what I do is I look for kind of what lines are naturally there and I emphasize them. And that's a great way to get a very natural looking and interesting background. I'm just gonna pick something up. So, and as I was preparing for this and thinking about the collage, I was looking through some of my kind of failed art pieces and scraps that I had hung on to try and find something that might work together with this page. And lo and behold, see, now I thought maybe I was going to glue this for you, but I decided that that was going to not work great, but hopefully you're going to be able to kind of get a sense. So now this was a piece, here, I'll hold this up for you because you guys might find this interesting. So this was like a kind of a thick piece of manila paper that then I covered with tissue paper and then used like a glue and water Elmer's solution to glue it onto the page. And then I took watercolor and dripped it into all these wrinkles. So fun. Definitely recommend that. You could definitely do that straight in the journal or do it on a piece like I did and then glue it in. And I've got this other scrap of a really nice paper. And then this is from a piece that I did that didn't really work, but again, I cut it out with some interesting scissors. And it says, "Dry your wings in the sun, you've only begun to understand." It's lyrics from one of my favorite singers, Deb Talon. So I've got that in there too. I think this went here somewhere. In any case, you can start to see how when you save a lot of these pieces, suddenly now I've got this really cool, interesting page. And if I didn't have this awesome orange background, which by the way has been sitting around for months with me waiting for it to tell me what to do, I wouldn't have been able to put this piece together. And I will glue it later, but I'm not going to glue it right now with you guys on. So that was that one. And looks like I have a question. So let me just see. So Beth is asking, what do you use to adhere your collage pieces to the paper? So another great question. And I also these days tend to use the Yes paste. Yes paste comes, I'm sorry I didn't bring it on here, I forgot. It comes in a big jar and it basically kind of looks like what comes in the glue sticks, but all in a jar. So you need like a little wooden stick, like a popsicle stick I use to take it out. And then you basically kind of just wipe it onto the surface. It's very strong. So for instance, like this button, I was gonna also incorporate into that page I just showed you. And it will totally hold the button. It'll hold heavier things when I make spirit sticks. Like if you guys have seen those tutorials on my website, I use it to adhere some of the stuff on the spirit sticks. So it's a really great material. I definitely recommend it. So, and you can find that at Michael's or on Dick Blick or a bunch of different places. So thanks, Beth. That's a great question. I also wanted to show you about sewing into your art journal page. So actually I ahead of time did a little bit of a sample. Now I know this doesn't look fabulous just kind of sitting here on the page, but I just wanted to show you how without any special talent whatsoever, I just sewed like little knots into the page, okay? And I also sewed a little edge here. So instead of just having a plain old boring edge of your page, you could sew around the edge of it to add some interest. And I'll give you some samples here to get a sense of how this would start to actually look good. This is another altered book. This page I love. So I've got one piece of yarn here and some embroidery thread that's coming around it and around it and around it. I've got the page itself, and then on top of it, I've got some tissue paper. And then this is a really lovely piece of silk fabric. And then I've got that sewn in with some pink embroidery fabric. And this is a piece of a failed art piece, which here in the center looks totally lovely. And obviously this is a much smaller section of an entire piece. So that gives you a sense. You know, and this fun little card over here is, and my book is falling apart as you can see. I need to rebind it, but so here is another one of the pages that I really love out of this book. I put in a little pocket, and this is one of the things that I wanted to show you. So this is a page from a different book, and I've left some words. So it says, "Deeper snow started back toward her." And then I've got this little pocket where I've used a photocopy, and I've pasted some tissue paper on it, and I painted onto it, and I wrote hope. And from the same thing, I think, kind of an edge of a pot there, and I wrote, "I believe in you." And of course, there's a little bit of glitter in there. Try not to glitter bomb yourself, but a little bit of glitter can be really fun. And I've got beads on this page glued on. You can do a lot with your journals. And let me see here. This is one of my favorites. So this page over here on the right-hand side, this would be really fun to try. I encourage you. So on the right-hand side are buttons, which I covered over with bits and pieces of other art pieces that I ended up not liking or not using, or pieces from cards or magazine cutouts. Those are some really, really fun ways to start collaging and getting things together, and having that 3D element in your book can be really fun. Sometimes you may need to rip out a few pages of your book in order to make space for that. You want to be careful if you do that, that you're not ripping out pages and making your book weaker. So you have to kind of look at it carefully. You can see how on the right side, I've also got some natural elements. I've got a stick here that's painted, and same one down here, and they're both tied in with the string. I don't know if you could see that. So there's a lot to play with there. I also wanted to show you, again, using a really simple image, how you can use, this is just obviously circles, and I've just used watercolor, and I just really loosely done some like donut shapes throughout the page. And I mean, I don't know if it seems great to you guys, but I love this page. I think it's wonderful, and I think that this is the page. This is it. That's the end of it. And so again, it's just, sometimes it's the really simplest things that are the most beautiful and satisfying. And it looks like we have a question from Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Let's see. So Sarah and I had an opportunity to talk because she won one of my contests in the past. So we've gotten to know each other a bit, which has been super fun. So she says, how do you archive or store your art journals? Do you keep them in an easily accessible place so you can return to them easily, or do you store them away? How many art journals do you keep at a time? So many questions. I'm covered in paint. That's great. Thank you for giving me a little taste of what's going on over there. That's fun. I keep a bunch at the same time. I mean, I think obviously for some people that's going to be limited by economics. I tend to be sort of a materials hoard to the extent that I can be, and that I'll actually use it. So like actually a bunch of the journals, maybe half of the journals that I've shown you, I'm still working in. But I tend to have, say, 2 or 3 that I'm mostly working in at a time. But sometimes I'll have like a couple of blank pages here or there, and I'll go back and do something in those. Or if I'm looking for inspiration, it's good to go back to an old book. I don't archive them. You know, maybe I should, you know, especially given that, you know, the other question from, I think it was Beth, asking about sealing the pages. So something to look into. And I guess I'm not the expert on that, so sorry. Thank you for your question. And just one more thing about kind of the simple images. This one, again, I've got some gesso on the page. Oh, these are great. 10-page journals are super, super fun. I just kind of messily did some gesso and then scribbled on the page with a metallic marker and then some Sharpies. Really, really fun. You can also do, as a background, an entire page of scribble. That is a great, relaxing, easy background for you. And one last example for the photo collage, kind of incorporating some watercolor. These are little pockets here that are sewn in. It's really fun. Okay. So really that's probably what we have time for today. I had so much more that I wanted to show you, so just goes to show we're gonna have to do it again, which would be really, really fun. I would love to hear from you guys if there's more questions that are left over that I didn't answer, or things that you'd like to know. We can talk about that in a minute. Actually, I should say, if you have them now, let me know, and while I'm kind of chatting, if they pop up, then I'll start to answer them. Because in a few minutes we'll finish up. So the other thing I just want to let you know is that, like I mentioned on the blog today, I have those fun art pouches that I made, and I'm really excited to be able to give some of these away. So let me just show you mine. I've been using this in my purse, so I have some fun stuff in there. And so here's some of the ones that you could win. Aren't they sweet? And I found these, believe it or not, at Staples on sale for 50 cents for a big one and a small one together. How awesome is that? And I had such a blast doing this with all different stamps. And these are all stamps that I made in acrylic paint. This is my little fishy one. So if you would like a chance to win these, and if you're interested in learning more about art journaling and you liked what we did tonight, you hopefully can see in the right-hand box about Art Journaling 101. Right now it's on sale for $19 for the weekly delivery. And for anybody who registers in the next 24 hours, I'm going to randomly pick 5 people from that group to receive one of those art pouches. So I think that's going to be really fun, and I'm really excited to do that. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It's been a ton of fun. And again, feel free to reach out with any questions you have, or let me know what else you'd like to see for future webinars. And thank you so much. Bye-bye.